We're lucky tonight to be joined by Faith Wilson. She's a Wicklow-based ecologist. She's a founding member of East Wicklow Rivers Trust, and she's a key consultant on this project. She's full of information. She will guide us through the whole story, the what, the when, the how, and the where, I hope, and why nature-based solutions like these are extremely important in tackling climate crisis and improving catchment health. Now,
Um, thank,
just
thanks.
before you go, Faith, sorry. I'm going to finish out the evening by playing a clip actually from Gaylord Nelson in 1969, who is the founder of Earth Day, and which is what we're presenting here today. So anyway, off you go, Faith. Thank you very much.
Very good. And we're extremely grateful also for the support from Community Foundation Ireland, who are helping with other aspects of this climate project, because it's a jointly funded. The main bulk of work is being funded by Wicklow County Council, and then Community Foundation Ireland are helping with the community engagement and the actual some of the hoping to have some volunteers come and help with some of the work later in the year. So thanks to them. So everybody's very welcome tonight. I'm just going to start sharing my screen and start with the presentation. So can everybody see that okay? Oops, sorry, it's just not going to full screen. Okay, does that look okay, Lorna? Thumbs up? You're on mute. I can't hear you, Lorna, you're on mute.
There is a raised hand, but I'm not exactly sure why. No, it's
I think
gone.
it was just a thumbs up that you can see it in. Thanks for
Oh,
that.
perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, so just great to be here this evening. And this is a project that the East Wicklow Rivers Trust and Wicklow Uplands Council uh, developed as a climate action. And the area in which the East Wicklow Rivers Trust are based and work are all the rivers and streams that enter the Irish Sea within the Wicklow county borders. So this map gives you an idea of where those rivers are and lakes and so on. And as you can see, we aren't dealing with the headwater streams of the Dodder or the Liffey or the Slaney, because thankfully now there are rivers trusts established, some of which have been running for a long time, such as the Dodder, covering those areas. So Wicklow is lucky that we have rivers trusts looking after all of our rivers. And you can see that nearly all of our rivers, apart from some of the smaller coastal streams, start their life in the uplands in Wicklow. So they're generally very uh, busy, active kind of watercourses. They're fast flowing, they're eroding, they're unstable. They're not like lowland watercourses where you have fine sediments getting deposited, and quite often they're flowing over exposed bedrock or maybe loose rock. And within our rivers in the uplands, we often have little small pools and little waterfalls. And in terms of the in-stream vegetation, you don't tend to have, things like you get in the lowlands, like flag iris or reed canary grass or reeds growing along them, because these rivers, they go up and down depending on rainfall events. And there isn't much chance for those kind of plants to get going. So you're really looking generally at mosses and liverworts. But we're all suffering a bit from shifting baseline syndrome because we're forgetting about one aspect that isn't necessarily in the river but is on the riverbank. So this is our typical upland habitats, things like blanket bog, good sphagnum cover, which is holding water and releasing it very, very slowly back to the river and back to the landscape. Um, our uplands are dominated primarily by uh, agricultural practices such as sheep grazing or upland forestry, typically dense conifer plantations. And often when you speak to somebody about trees in our uplands, this is what people immediately think of are sick spruce plantations planted on peat in our upland areas. And we're forgetting about our gully woodland habitats and actually our upland oak woodlands. And we get little glimpses of that. This is a little waterfall at the uh, Ravens Rock in the Glencree Valley. You can see there's a little mountain ash growing beside it, giving a hint of what we're looking at. And then obviously we have a mighty waterfall like the Periscope waterfall in the Dargle. And you can see there's woodland adjoining that, not where there's fast flow, because the trees don't get a chance to get established in high flow conditions, but gives you an idea of what we should be seeing in our uplands. And when we walk in the hills and the uplands, whether it's for work or pleasure, we get again little glimpses of remnants of those habitats. This is in Glasnamullen on the slopes of Jouse Mountain. And you can see in the distance again, we have a mountain ash tree there, but no other obvious trees along that watercourse. So when we're looking at the woodlands in our uplands in Wicklow, we do have some stands of oak, birch, holly woodland, and these are generally dominated by sessile oak, but sometimes pedunculate or hybrid oaks. And then the other common components are downy birch, holly, and rowan. And in some cases, you might just get a thicket of downy birch. And Scots pine is also a natural component of our upland woodlands. And then the species that we forget about because they're very, very rare and actually hard to see, things like aspen, whitebeam, and yew. And if you're in the uplands and you look up onto cliffs, you might be lucky enough to spot these trees, and they're hanging on up there where they can't be eaten by sheep or by deer. So this type of woodland habitat is actually what's called an annex habitat. It's a habitat of European significance, listed under the EU Habitats Directive, and it's called this technical name of Old Sessile Oak Woods with holly and hard fern in the British Isles. And when these sites were being designated, this is one of the reasons why the woodlands in Wicklow Mountains National Park in the Wicklow Mountains SAC are protected, is because they're an annex habitat. The big blocks of woodland were picked and identified for protection, as opposed to small little linear woodlands like we get along our watercourses. So we have an opportunity to consider those when we're thinking about our landscape. And these images give you a sense of trees in the uplands, things like this magnificent ancient willow. And on the cliffs up near Loch Dan, this is actually a little grove of aspen trees, which are hanging on up there. Not a tree you see often. But we can look at the names of our mountains and places within the Wicklow Uplands, and those give us a sense of where trees were in the landscape. So places such as Camaderry, Slieve Caimandera, means the step of the oak wood. Lugnaquilla itself, our highest mountain, means the hollow of the wood. Broca means badger area. Badgers, of course, being very much associated as a woodland mammal. The name Fancy, or Lugalaw, as it's also known as, is derived from Whinch oak, which means our ash tree. Derrybone, the white oak. Capure, the stump of the yew. So these all give us an idea of where trees were in the landscape and how these places got their names. And obviously, if you go to somewhere like Glendalough, we have some very fine examples of mature oak woodland, as you can see here. And when we're thinking about trees in the uplands, we often kind of forget that they should be there. And I, as an ecologist, I forgot they should be there too. And a real inspiration for myself and the project forester, Paddy Purser, was the Trees for Life project, which is run by a charity in Scotland. And one of their principal objectives has been to restore the Caledonian pine woodlands, which is their main native woodland habitat in Scotland. And they've been working on this for over 40 years now, trying to mimic nature, working where you've got remnants of woodland and trying to expand them outwards, looking at particular keystone species such as aspen or juniper or some of the montane willows. They have much higher mountains in Scotland than we do. And there's some alpine specialist willows that grow up literally at the tree line. They're prostrate and grow flat to the ground. And they're looking at trying to recreate ecological niches and linkages and controlling introduced species and letting nature do most of the work. So very, very inspiring stuff. And down near the borders, these gully woodlands, as we're calling them in Ireland, they have a special name in Scotland. They're called Clúch woodlands. And again, something we've kind of lost sense of in Ireland. Um, Another project that was of great inspiration to us was this project that was run by the WWF in the UK called Slow the Flow. And this diagram shows the kind of pressures on rivers, including upland habitats and looking at grazed landscapes with no trees, very rapid runoff from high mountains like we have in Wicklow, where you have high rainfall events. And really what we want our upland landscapes to be doing is to be holding on to that water and releasing it slowly, acting as a big sponge. And if we have gully woodland habitats and we have our upland habitats in good condition, this is what our landscapes can do for us. And we have to start thinking at a catchment level as to how we act. It's a kind of unfortunate term, catchment. It doesn't mean a lot to people. I quite like the American term watershed, because actually we all live in a catchment, but we don't really think of it that way. So this was a great inspiration, this project as well. And back in 2008, Woodlands of Ireland commissioned a pilot study, which myself and Paddy completed for them, on looking at the whole idea of gully woodland restoration. And we looked at some headwater streams on the Upper Dodder and tried to set out how would gully woodlands get restored, the challenges, funding requirements, where would be suitable to plant, where wouldn't. And this report's available online on the Woodlands of Ireland website if anybody's interested in it. And it was fantastic then, as part of the SUIS project, to bring that concept to the table and to engage with farmers in the uplands. And one of the measures that many of the farmer groups and the commonage groups did was to restore trees along their upland watercourses. And there was great enthusiasm for it, and there was a lot of fun doing it. It became a lovely family event that actually whole generations did on the land. And the project funded the trees and the tree tubes that were used to protect the trees and the stakes, and the farmers provided all the labour in actually planting the trees. And you can see here on the image, it's on my left, of little remnants of where we had a mountain ash, and more trees have been planted around it. So that gives you a great idea of the type of planting that SUIS did. And in terms of where trees were planted, we'll talk about this later also, but very much in the areas where trees should have been, and where bracken grows on the hills next to streams is quite often a good indicator of where trees might naturally be. And this is what we're trying to achieve. This is actually a really lovely intact gully woodland on the Upper Dodder, down in quite a deep ravine. And the trees here are magnificent, and you can feel the temperature difference when you drop down into these gully woodlands. And that planting, particularly on the Upper Dodder, has been continued by National Parks and Wildlife Service. They've been doing amazing restoration of gully woodland planting, often with lots of volunteers from the likes of Wild Wicklow and Mountaineering Ireland. And the work there is being funded through the conservation measures funding. So we're going to start to see, we're seeing an energy around this in our uplands, which is really welcome, because these trees are going to deliver a lot, we hope. So thinking about this, and thinking about, there was money available from the Community Climate Action Fund, which was dispersed through the local authorities. And we put together a plan between Wicklow Uplands Council and ourselves, the East Wicklow Rivers Trust, to try and take climate action and to continue this theme of planting trees and restoring habitats in the uplands. And then we were lucky enough to get further support for the project from Community Foundation Ireland from their Climate Action Works Fund. So what are we doing and why? Well, primarily what we're working towards is the restoration and expansion of gully woodland in our uplands. And this woodland establishment will increase biodiversity within the uplands. It'll increase the presence of seed-bearing and nut-bearing tree species for wildlife. And it'll also, what we hope, is recreate an ecological corridor which will link kind of lowland enclosed farmland with upland open moorland. It'll improve cover for feeding and breeding birds in upland valleys. Our uplands are worryingly silent of a number of bird species, and a number of species are missing. We hope to also improve the fisheries value of the adjoining watercourses, and this will, having trees there will provide food sources for our in-stream fauna through leaf litter, invertebrates, and the whole role of trees and how that interacts with water bodies is probably the subject of another webinar that we could do another time. Obviously, trees assist in reducing erosion of soil, and they also improve the regulation and control of water flow, and this can help reduce flooding events downstream. They can also act as a buffer to improve water quality in our headwater streams, and they should provide, as the trees mature in the long term, shading for these water streams, headwater streams. And we're now seeing temperatures from climate change impacts in the summer of, I've recorded temperatures of over 24 degrees in the Avonmore. Once water temperatures go above 21, 22 degrees, our in-stream biota and salmonid fish become stressed and oxygen levels decrease. Obviously, trees are very important in carbon sequestration, but the other big thing is the whole role of community engagement and education, and we're delighted to have so many people join the webinar tonight on this. And furthermore, just trying to build climate resilience, trying to make that link between what happens in the uplands and what happens. Most of our towns and villages are actually located on watercourses, and for example, in Arklow, there's a large flood relief scheme has been approved for funding and will begin construction. And we can help be part of that using a nature-based solution in the uplands. And the other thing which was very interesting, just looking in the Suez project, was quite large areas of our uplands are vulnerable to landslides, and having trees and tree roots helps stabilize slopes, something we wouldn't necessarily think of. And flooding, like here's, for example, a record of the huge flood that happened in Glendalough in September 2010. The whole car park of the Glendalough Hotel was flooded, the OPW car park was flooded, and these things are going to happen more and more and more as our climate becomes more changeable. We have more of these intense rainfall events like we had here in Wicklow on Good Friday and Easter Saturday just gone. And we need to be thinking about trying to react to these in ways that aren't just about building walls. And looking at the quality of our headwater streams, this is a map from the EPA, and it shows that actually quite a lot of our headwater streams are at risk of not achieving good water status. You can see they're marked red there. And in the lowlands, a lot of them are in better condition. And hopefully trees will help support improvements in this area. So a few things to think about. We've touched on why trees are important in the uplands there, but what are the kind of appropriate places for them, and what are the right kind of trees, and how do you actually do it? What are the main challenges? So when you're choosing to plant trees in the uplands, we're looking at the mineral soils generally beside the watercourses. Quite often these are dominated by bracken or maybe species poor acid grassland. There might be some areas that are species poor with rushes. But we're generally avoiding areas of peat. We don't want to plant blanket bog, don't want to go planting wet heath. Trying to find places that are out of the reach of deer is important. And this is quite challenging work. And because we have a project to deliver, some of our trees are being planted by professional contractors, but there is an opportunity for volunteers to get involved later in the year, particularly within the deer exclosures. So, what sort of trees are we planting? Well, they're all native species. You can see them listed here. The rowan or the mountain ash is a very iconic tree in our uplands. Beautiful colour in the leaves, beautiful berries for birds, beautiful flowers earlier in the year, supports a great diversity of insects. Willows, quite often overlooked, even if they only form small bushes, they're all providing habitat. Willows are some of the first resources for our pollinators as they emerge in the spring. If you look at any willow tree now, at this time of year, it's alive with bumblebees all foraging. Downy birch, a real Wicklow tree, and very, very important. I just watched the birch outside my house. They're alive with birds all day foraging. Hawthorn, we tend to think of more isolated shacks of hawthorn in the uplands, and we're not talking about wall-to-wall hawthorns, but just small amounts. Scots pine, of course. I mean, the iconic kind of Scots pine in the Glendalough Valley and in the Carnation Plantation are really important. And other trees that are rarer, things like aspen, and where the ground is less acidic, hazel trees. And all these trees are ideally of local provenance. They should be grown from locally collected seed, or if that's not possible, from other areas collected in Ireland. And for willows, we can actually take cuttings from willow trees that are existent along these watercourses and stick those cuttings directly into the ground. So the main challenges, the biggest challenge of all to this restoration of woodland habitat are deer. We have non-native invasive Sika deer, and they are very, very challenging for us. You can see the browsing pressure, like here's a holly tree in the uplands. A tree, you may laugh, it looks like a small topiary box shrub you'd find in your garden. This is browsing pressure from deer. And it's a big challenge. Our deer population is very high and at very unsustainable levels. So this is one of the solutions, which is using tree guards. So on the Suez project, the main method that was available was to use the plastic tree tubes, and they really stand out in the landscape, and you're introducing a lot of plastic into the landscape, which we're not so mad about. And this was a technique that MPWS developed, whereby trees are protected with this wire mesh and with rebar, which can be recycled, taken up and used again. And the trees, I think, are actually going to grow better in this situation as well, because they'll be more wind firm with the wind moving through the tree cage as opposed to growing up in the tubes. So this gives you an idea of the access areas that we're talking about. Quite challenging to get to these upland sites, and this gives you an idea of a planting plan. You can see there's some existing mature trees there. The idea would be to enhance those. This site is somewhat accessible in that there's a wheelchair track nearby, but some of the other sites are more remote, and we may use helicopters to actually bring in the fencing material, because we're also going to include some exclosures which will require a deer fence like you see around many of the sites. So so that's the project. I'll just stop sharing if I can get my mouse to work. And thanks a million.
I'm doing a clap, clap. Thanks a million, Faith. As always, very clear and precise. And Faith, there's a number of questions have come in. Are you okay to to try and tackle these?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Um, we have Kira is asking provenance, question mark. How do you source trees of provenance?
So there are a number of efforts underway. So, for example, Rewild Wicklow are working in collaboration with MPWS to collect seed from within the national park and grow it on. So that's the ideal. But we don't have that luxury, so we have ordered and have bought our trees from None So Hardy Nursery in Wicklow, and they collect their seed from registered stands of native woodland areas across Ireland, and they grow them on in their nursery down in outside Shalala. And then those trees are lifted and put into cold store and then made available for planting out. And provenance is very important because we want to use Irish genetic material and not be importing trees from anywhere else and risking bringing in infections as happened with ash dieback.
I also have a question from Oisin Murphy. Are there plans to extend this project into West Wicklow?
Well, that'll be up to the Rivers Trust to cover West Wicklow and maybe the Wicklow Uplands Council. So that's not something that we're going to cover as East Wicklow Rivers Trust. We're going to stay within our area.
Jane Gibbons has a question, and I'm not too sure actually even what it means. Are there landowner incentives? How might landowner incentives and policy frameworks in Ireland influence the success of gully woodland projects, particularly in areas like the East Wicklow Uplands?
Yeah, well, there's actually amazing incentives to restore native trees on land if you're lucky enough to own land and if it's suitable for tree planting. So the Forest Service has fantastic funding available. You can plant areas as small as 0.1 of a hectare under the Native Woodland Scheme, for example. There's a new native tree area which is available to farmers to plant small pockets of woodland on their farms. There is the Woodlands for Water measure to help plant trees along water courses. And the biggest challenge, really, like the biggest cost of this project is primarily in dealing with the deer. And that is one of the biggest challenges to doing this work. And when we did the pilot study on the Upper Dodder, that was one of the things we flagged. So, for example, if you want to plant a native woodland under the Native Woodland Scheme, there's money available for deer fencing to help protect the trees. But like deer fencing works well when you're enclosing a large area. But if you have because it's based on area, so if you have a long, thin site like a river, you end up with very little area within next to the river and a lot of perimeter. And so that's a huge expense in deer fencing. And that's one of the reasons why, well, just we wouldn't want to be putting up huge, big linear deer fences around watercourses anyway. But that's why we're using small deer exclosures as part of the project.
Okay. Sorry, if anybody has any questions, please do put them into the Q&A, or if anybody has anything they wish to contribute, it is possible just to put up your hand and I can allow you to talk.
But you might be recorded.
You will be recorded. Control. There doesn't seem to be anything coming through. I'll give it a moment.
That's no bother.
Donny Anderson, yeah. Donny, please, yeah. You just have to take off your mic, Donny.
We there now?
You're
Yeah,
there.
hi, Donny.
Yeah, hey, Faith and Lorna, thank you. Just what Faith was saying about the stuff growing along the sides of the rivers, like it doesn't get a chance to grow in the uplands. But it's surprising the way the rhododendron is getting a chance,
It is.
getting worked down and getting a grip. And in a
Yeah.
few years' time, I think the whole rivers, like from where it starts anyway, downwards, will be very dense with rhododendron unless there's something done with it.
Yeah, and as part of the plans that we've developed, if there are any invasive species present, we'll deal with those as part of this project. But it is a big problem, and it's a big problem on the Upper Dodder along those gully woodlands there. And we noted that back in the pilot study that we did. And of course, like rhododendron is very unpalatable to most stock and to deer. So that's why it gets away. Whereas literally you plant a young oak, and if you don't protect it, it just gets nipped. And that's it, kind of pretty much toast. So yeah, we need to take action on those things.
I muted you again, Tony. Didn't want you to get too excited. I hope that answers that. Anybody else? Anything? There is a question from We're in Lines. How did you go about engaging landowners? Any main challenges with that?
Yeah, so we put out a call, Wicklow Uplands Council put out a call to see if some landowners were interested. Some land isn't suitable. We're very much looking at areas outside the national park, and we're delighted to have partnered with Onoiga on this project. So one of the sites that is going to have trees planted on it is on their land either side of the Avonbeg River up in the Glenmalure Valley next to the hostel there. And that's a site that we hope both Onoiga and other volunteers might come and help plant that. That'll be primarily within deer exclosures, and there'll be a chance for people to come and take part in that this autumn. Oh, and also we're limited in how many sites we can do. You know, you'd be amazed, the money doesn't go that far. And hopefully we're looking at some other sites in the Glencree Valley. But there is an obligation on like the participants to mind the trees and to follow up. Like you have to do some tending, and you need to look after them. You'd be amazed. You can put up a deer fence with a small exclosure. Deer are less likely to go into it. But if you're fencing a big area, you can end up with deer getting in through a deer fence. So it's not just a question of kind of planting the trees and walking away. So there does need to be that commitment from the landowner to mind the trees and look after them. So if there's no more questions, Lorna, we could play your video, and we said we'd only keep people for about 40 minutes, so we better hold true on that.
You're well, excellent. As I look at the clock over the shoulder. Yes, yeah, so just before I play that out, yeah, there's no other questions there. I can't see any, and there's nothing in the chat. Just to reiterate, I'd like to thank the Community Climate Action Fund and Wicklow County Council, and also the Community Foundation Ireland's Community Engagement Scheme, and also to LawPro for supporting us to deliver this work. And I would particularly like to say a very large thank you to Faith. She delivers her knowledge extremely well. She turns science into very, very palatable information that's very easily shared. So I just want to acknowledge that. It's wonderful working with her.
Thanks. And if people want to keep in touch with the project, probably the best way is through our social media channels. But certainly with the Rivers Trust, there's a subscribe button to emails on. If you go to our website, you'll see a sign up through MailChimp, and we need to get a bit more organized about sending out the odd email to everybody. But we try and put things on the website and on Facebook, and I think similarly for yourselves in the Wicklow Uplands Council.
I was about to say I'll get in my pitch as well. Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I think you all know where to find us, because you have found us. And on that note, yeah, I think you have to unshare your screen, and we'll close out on that and say thank you again to everybody.
I don't think there's any other issue viewed in its broadest sense, which is as critical to mankind as the issue of the quality of the environment in which we live. Our goal is not just an environment of clean air and water and scenic beauty. Our goal is an environment of decency, quality, and mutual respect for all human beings and all other living creatures. Our goal is a decent environment in its broadest and deepest sense. The battle to restore a proper relationship between man and his environment, between man and other living creatures, will require a long, sustained political, moral, ethical, and financial commitment far beyond any commitment ever made by any society in the history of man. Are we able? Yes. Are we willing? That's the unanswered question.